Welcome to another episode of Not From Concentrate, a food podcast for busy brains. I'm Catherine Smart. I'm a writer, a recipe developer, and a food entrepreneur. And like many creatives, I have ADHD. So I'm on a mission to help anyone with a busy brain spark creativity, calm the chaos, and find joy in the kitchen.
This could happen to you. This could happen to you. This could happen to you.
Today, I'm chatting with Kamaal Jarrett, the founder of Hillside Harvest island-inspired sauces. Kamaal is a friend from my time as a food startup founder, and he is as smart and business savvy as he is warm and funny. If you tell me you are thinking about starting a food brand, he is one of the first people I'm going to send you to. So we chat about leaving the corporate world to start his own sauce business, the history and breadth of Caribbean cooking, and how the recent birth of his daughter has really focused him and shifted his perspective on entrepreneurship. And you guys, if you haven't eaten lunch yet, I'm sorry, because all this talk of Jamaican patties and cocoa bread is definitely going to leave you hungry. So let's get into it. I wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Not From Concentrate newsletter on Substack. Subscribe for free to stay up to date on new episodes and get access to giveaways and bonus content. I also want to give a special shout out to my paid subscribers who get new, wildly delicious and distraction-proof recipes delivered to their inboxes every month, as well as essays and tips for cooking with a busy brain. Plus, paid subscribers get access to my full recipe archive. Head to catherinesmart.com to become a free or paid subscriber, and thank you for supporting the show. Kamaal Jarrett from Hillside Harvest, welcome to Not From Concentrate.
Thank you for having me.
Kamaal, before we get into all the nitty gritty, you had a baby. You and your wife welcomed your first child. I have not seen you since. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Baby Kennedy was born in May and has taken charge of the household since. So it's been a exciting new phase of life and just juggling everything, but seeing her grow has been amazing so far.
Yeah. How is your world turned upside down? I mean, you already were doing an awful lot as a one-man band here.
Yeah, it's been a little nuts. Like it's always like you think you can't, you have no capacity, and then all of a sudden a life form comes out of nowhere, and you find some way to find more capacity. So it's been a lot, but we've gotten a ton of help. Both parents have been helpful. My wife's parents watch her during the day on Monday. My mom stays with us from Tuesday to Thursday. And then we kind of work from home and share baby duty on Friday. So we're making it work. We're making it work.
That's awesome. And I love that you said capacity, like the true like corporate shill that you are from your background. Which is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Kamaal, because, you know, I've had a bunch of authors, some chefs on, but you're the first person I'm talking to from my old life. And my old life, of course, was running not just with my co-founder, Jackie, which was a sauce and dressing brand, but I thought it would be so cool to talk to somebody who, you know, has a food business and also made that crazy jump from corporate life to entrepreneurship in the food space. So could you start a little bit by just telling us about Hillside Harvest and how this Jamaican food brand came to be, or Caribbean inspired, I should say?
Yeah. So we are a Caribbean inspired sauce and condiment company. Started back in 2019. And prior to starting Hillside, I was working at Keurig Dr. Pepper in product development, product management. Loved everything I did. I was essentially kind of the advocate for the consumer, taking consumer insights, building it into specifications for products, and then, you know, building those products. And then, you know, handing it off to a salesperson to then go sell in. And I loved everything I did. I got to own the P&L. We got to, you know, present at stage gate. So a lot of what I do today is kind of a replication of what I did at Keurig. But one of the things that I wanted to do was kind of build my own brand, and specifically something that linked back to my heritage, being born in Jamaica, raised here in the States. Wanted to create a brand that could pay some homage to that journey. And in going through the store, would notice at the time, I think the international aisle is looking a bit, or is trying to look a bit different than it did even 7 years ago. But I would notice when shopping for my own groceries, like the offerings were limited for Caribbean food. If there was a Caribbean section at all, it was in the international aisle, not in the main aisle. There wasn't a ton of representation in the main aisle of any category. And so I wanted to create something that would highlight the experiences in the Caribbean, the diverse cultures that are throughout the Caribbean, the influences from Spain, from Asia, from all over, that is the Caribbean. And so wanted to figure out what category to jump into, and we actually launched with hot sauce, because hot sauce was and still is booming at the time. And we always wanted it to be, and I say we a lot, but it's me and and
some helpers.
Me, yeah, exactly. But ultimately, I wanted to choose a category that was exciting, but I also wanted this to evolve into a platform business where we could potentially leverage that same brand positioning across different categories. We haven't gotten there yet. We still have a lot to do within sauces and condiments, and so that's the main focus. But it's we have more than enough work to do before we make that crossover into other categories. But it's been a wild ride. We've seen so many changes, not just in the sauce category, but just from international in general. The increase in interest in spice, the increase in interest in global foods, the transformation of pretty much every aisle in grocery. And so it's been a lot of pivots, a lot of kind of moving around, but it's been exciting.
So for anyone who's not intimately familiar with Caribbean food, and I think there really isn't a lot of representation there, and I've heard that from grocery buyers, I've heard that from cookbook publishers, it really is a cuisine that has not gotten the attention that it deserves. Mm-hmm. For those of us who maybe don't know as much about it, could you, and I know we're speaking in broad strokes, and as you said, there's like many different influences throughout the islands, could you paint a picture for me about what makes Caribbean food so special? Like, why is it such an important and exciting cuisine, and why should we all be, learning more about it and cooking with those influences?
The biggest thing is that the idea that there isn't one specific theme or flavor. It's very diverse. And I think people take for granted. I think, I'm lucky enough to be from one of the best islands in the Caribbean, Jamaica, of course. but
not at all biased. Just reporting here.
But a lot of people leverage what they know of Jamaica and kind of paint that as all of the Caribbean, because it's one of the more popular islands, right? And the fact is, there's just so much that is in, all throughout the Caribbean, including places like Cuba, Puerto Rico, that have kind of a more Latin flair that people don't necessarily think of as included in the Caribbean, which definitely is. Places like Barbados, places like Trinidad. There's Haiti, and we're seeing a ton of Haitian influence start to increase over the past couple of years. And so what I will say, that the common theme is that there are a ton of different cultures represented within the culture of the Caribbean, for obvious reasons, slave trade, different levels of colonialism over the course of many years. So, you have Spanish influence, you have European influence, for us in the Jamaica, you have UK influence, you have indigenous influences, all of that kind of combined. And then you have these extremely prideful people and strong people who have held on to these recipes and evolved them over time. And so it's hard for me to articulate with one broad stroke what is Caribbean food. And I think that's what excites me about what we can do with the brand, is that we can open up, people's world to just the possibilities and the innovativeness that we can have as a brand with so many influences that we can draw from. And so, yes, it's jerk. Yes, it's escovitch. Yes, it's all these things, but it's so much more than that. The flavors are just endless.
At the top of the show, I introduced it as a Jamaican brand because I know about your heritage. But as you said, you draw from flavors throughout the Caribbean. So how do you balance that of not wanting to oversimplify, quote unquote, Caribbean flavors, but then also wanting to be able to showcase all these flavors? Like, how do you think about, as a Jamaican American man, talking about Caribbean food as a whole and bringing it to mainstream grocery? No pressure.
Yeah, it's to be completely honest with you, it's a process that I'm still trying to figure out. We just went through a rebrand a year ago, right? And before that, we were very much focused on being based in Boston, like what our competition here in Boston was doing. And so our branding, we're always Caribbean focused, but we weren't really speaking that language. Even when talking to buyers at grocery stores, more about the local aspect of things and the flavor aspect of our specific products. And quite frankly, because I'm from Jamaica and the products are a byproduct of my upbringing, the initial products they were very Jamaican focused. And so as we looked at the rebrand, part of that is adding to the roadmap products that are drawn from other countries within the Caribbean. And so it's part of our growth story as we pitch, really making sure that we're not pigeonholing ourselves to one specific country, and that and it allows us to have more opportunity to align ourselves with trends as they emerge. And also, like I said, like Haiti, for example, we think about things like pickles and how exciting that is, and how we're starting to see people request like us to do a pickles. And so talking to folks from Haiti and chefs and getting their input. And so things like that, being nimble and being able to do things across that region is important to us. And so, yeah, when we talk to other folks, when we talk about the brand, we want to be specific and say that it's Caribbean and it's not just Jamaica, because that gives us the freedom to be a little bit more inclusive when it comes to our neighbors be a little bit more inclusive of like all the islands that are represented in the Caribbean, not just the one that I specifically come from.
Okay, and Kamaal, what is pickles?
So pickles is kind of like, and I'm not going to do it justice, but it's kind of like, you could think of it like a spicy relish almost, but it's vegetables kind of pickled and spices pickled. And it's similar to like an escovitch, if you've ever had an escovitch. So escovitch is kind of or escabeche, depending on where you're from. It's like vegetables that are julienned, pickled, usually with Scotch bonnet or some level of spice. And then, pour it over fish, chicken, what have you. So you get this vinegary, hot and rustic flavor with your meat in most places. Yeah. So I'm excited. We're trying to do some research on pickles itself and how, I want to be as authentic as we can be, but at the same time, make sure that we're able to, leverage our creativity as a brand and we like to pay respect, but incorporate some innovation as well. So excited to see what we can do with that particular sauce. But there's other sauces probably coming out before that that we're super excited about as well. We're going to be taking, not to give too much away, but we're going to be launching a Cuban-based sauce next year that we're super excited about as well.
You should know that your pineapple Fresno, so I have a private chef client and I bought it for him once and put it in the fridge. And I didn't realize like the expectation is now that I monitor the level in the bottle and I make sure there's always one of those in the fridge. And I made the mistake of not checking and it was not pretty. So be careful with the Hillside Harvest because it could addict it. So Kamaal, you and I have spent so much time, at trade shows and industry events. I look up to you so much as such like a smart business guy and bringing everything from your corporate life into your new scrappy entrepreneurial chapter. But I don't feel like we've actually had that much of an opportunity to talk about the inspiration and the food of your youth and like what really lit the fire in your belly to leave a very good, safe, lucrative career to go make your own damn sauce in a communal kitchen, which you've now scaled up from. But there's a there. And I want to hear a bit more about the food of Jamaica and the food of your youth and, what inspired the kind of dishes and the kind of people, that inspired you to take on this crazy project.
Yeah, I think I'll start with just food in general. I grew up in a household where both my parents worked, both my parents cooked. And so food was big. And then we were expected, we being my three brothers, were expected to also cook when my parents had to work late, right? So we learned how to cook by watching our parents, and the expectation was that we contribute in that way. I just kind of drew to it because for me it was a way to kind of release. It was creativity, and at a very young age, just really fell in love with cooking, and would wake up early on Saturday mornings and flip the channel to PBS and watch, all the early morning cooking shows. My aunt just happened to be a trained pastry chef, and I got to work with her in the kitchen, her teaching me, simple baking methods, and then also just cooking in general. She later then started a bakery and then a catering company. She started a catering company later on in life, and I was able to kind of see that and have a front row seat at that as well. And so, I mean, even up until when I graduated from college, I was looking at opportunities in kitchens, and I just never had the guts to go out and do anything about it. I remember there's this one story. I don't know if your viewers will enjoy this, but I get a kick out of it. Where this is after college. I started looking. I think it might even have been like Craigslist or something for like kitchen apprentices, and was talking to a chef. I can't even remember who the chef is. I'll have to go back and see if the email's still in my Gmail. And he was essentially giving me an apprenticeship, and, I'd have to work for free, but like for a couple months, and was telling me like all the things I learned, how to debone this and this and knife work and all this great stuff. And I'm super excited. And granted, my mom had just like probably spent, her last dime sending me to college. And so I send her the email, and my mom is pretty tech savvy, but somehow she replied all. And you can't even reply all because it was a forwarded email. So she had to go out of her way to copy him on it. Now that I think about it, and was just like, there's no way you're working for free for anybody. And this poor chef was trying to explain his way to my mom, and I was just like mortified. And then I ended up working in finance shortly after that.
That is like everyone's worst nightmare when they forward an email, and that is the best thing that I've ever heard.
It's like I always just brush it off as, oh, she replied all, but it's like there's no way for her to do that. She clearly copied him on it. But
in real time.
Yeah, exactly.
You're realizing this. You're like therapist.
Yeah. Exactly. I guess the point is that I just have always been drawn to that life, and just creating and the for me, again, it's kind of a release, but I love the idea of creating something. And that's why I was like, I went back to school for business, after finance. I spent a number of years in finance, knew before, but realized that it wasn't for me, and went back to school. And even during that time, was drawn to like R&D, product development, and creating things. So it's always been kind of a theme in my life. And it just so happened that I was in a position where I could go back and create a business that kind of allowed me to get back in the kitchen and cook. And so to go back to the origins of the question and specifically, Jamaican food and Caribbean food, for me, it was just a part of life. Like, if we were cooking, we were allowed to experiment, but for the most part, if my parents were cooking Jamaican food, with the exception like spaghetti and meatballs every once in a while. And so, it just became a staple. And especially on Sunday, we would cook a huge Sunday dinner. And so it just became like inviting friends over, or, going to other folks' houses. Like, I was raised with this idea of kind of this duality in terms of food, like that still exists today, right? Like there are days where I'm just like, if we're cooking in my house, it's a lot of, normal American food today, but every once in a while I'll have to cook some oxtail, or I'll have to do some curry goat. Even if my wife doesn't like it, it's like, well, I'll cook some salmon for you on the side, but I need like to go back to this. So and that's been the way it's been for the business. It's like, I wanted to create something that would be an outlet, but also scratch that itch of like, I just need a little bit of home, you know what I mean? And that's what the business has been, to a certain extent.
And speaking of oxtail and curry goat, and I'm really mad that I didn't eat lunch before we had this conversation, but if someone is walking into a Jamaican or a Caribbean restaurant for the first time and they are just feeling like, I'm so overwhelmed, I don't know what to order, like, like guide us a little bit. Like if we went to lunch and I said, Kamaal, like you take over the ordering, what should someone get? What should they look for?
For the newbie, you can't go wrong with a patty, right? So you can get a just regular beef patty, or if you're a vegetarian, they now make vegetarian patties. So funny story, I wanted, before Hillside, the idea was to create a quick service restaurant that took cocoa bread, which is like a coconut milk based bread. Like it's a sweet, delicious bread that you typically put a beef patty in. And a beef patty is just
incredible
like
hangover cure.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's so filling. But the goal was to kind of, in the same sense, create like a hybrid between like this American barbecue culture and Jamaican, just quick service. And we're seeing it all over New York now, but I'm going to say this was my idea first, but, take the cocoa bread and just like stuff it and make sandwiches, like a sandwich shop, but cocoa bread being the bread. The idea actually came from, working in finance and taking the train to Chacarera in the financial district to get these Chilean sandwiches
they're so good.
Yeah. Oh my God. They were so delicious. And we would sit there and eat this huge sandwich and then try to go back to work. It was impossible, but I was like, why can't we do this with cocoa bread? It would be even better in my opinion. But yeah, so for the newbie, I would say a patty is the way to go, but also you can't go wrong with just good old jerk chicken. Get some rice and peas, jerk chicken. You're probably going to be cabbage. If it's a good spot, you can ask for the cold veg. I love the cold veg. Cold veg is essentially just coleslaw with no mayonnaise. It's like a vinaigrette with carrot and cabbage, but like raw cabbage and carrot. It's delicious. And like a sweet vinaigrette on top. And that's my favorite thing to eat with like, well, for me, I don't really get jerk chicken outside of house. I like to make my own jerk chicken, but if I'm going out, oxtail is my number one. But nowadays you got to take out a mortgage to get oxtail. So you can instead of oxtail, stew beef. So it's just like a beef stew with rice. It's delicious. You really can't go wrong. You really can't. You just, I would say, make sure you bring an open mind, because something like oxtail that you're not used to, or something like curry goat may be the best thing you've ever had. And people shy away from those things just because they've never had it before. But it is those two things in particular, like the top of the food chain.
Oh, they're so good. Well, there's so much collagen in oxtail. I lived in Hawaii really briefly, and oxtail is huge there too. And it's just like when you think about a braise and something just like really comforting, and I'm going to get the textural words wrong, but it's like silky. It's just like silky
sticky,
and savory and flavorful.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And of course, we're all going to, go buy Hillside Harvest jerk and hot sauce and make our own. But I did want to give people just like an idea in case they are lucky enough to go to a restaurant. Okay, I want to jump back to some of the kind of business stuff. So obviously, you had a great education, you were well equipped, but I hope you don't mind me outing you just from our time together. Neither of us are like wildly independently wealthy. Like we need to pay our bills. We need our jobs to pay us money to live. So I want to hear a little bit more about what gave you the audacity to take the plunge and start this new job. Because I know there are people listening who have dreams like that. And this isn't saying they should or shouldn't do it, but how did you get the courage to quit your job and start Hillside Harvest?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd like to say it wasn't easy. Like every time I would get the courage to quit, because I've hit like a milestone that I like subjectively gave myself, I would get a promotion or I would get my year-end bonus, or I'd be like, oh, this is nice. And then and it would be tough. And I wasn't delusioned enough to think that I was going to out the gate, like make millions of dollars. But I think I had a good level of ignorance as to how much grinding and how many years of no income it would take to kind of get things moving. And so that ignorance definitely helped, because obviously if you go into things somewhat blind, you can't see all of the warning signs ahead of you. But I think for me, anyone starting a business, there has to be some level of confidence in yourself and your ability, and in the fact that you don't know a lot of what's ahead of you, but you have confidence in your ability to adjust. And so being good with ambiguity was one of my skills. And I'm realizing even back then, and more so now, like just crisis management is for me like really, really key. Like when things go wrong, I typically pause and I'm able to kind of evaluate without a ton of emotion. And that level of being able to kind of deal with stress and what have you made giving up a very well-paid job and moving into like the abyss of of uncertainty easier to deal with, because I just felt like, you know what, if things go wrong, I'll figure it out. Whether that's obviously there's some naivete in that statement, but I think that's truly how I felt.
Why are you that way, do you think?
I have no idea.
Were you born that way, or I'm not that way? Tell me your ways.
Yeah. Part of that's being from a warm climate where we just move slower and think through things, even walking. And so no, I truly, I don't know. Like, I think it's been that way, growing up. I just have always been more of a pause and think person. And that doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. I make a ton of them, but I'm usually okay with the mistakes and okay. It's more about trying to figure out how to like dig myself out. Right. And so knowing that I've always had that level of calmness, I felt very comfortable moving into a space where I knew I was going to make mistakes. And I couldn't tell you what, the reason for that. I don't know if it was my upbringing, but it's definitely something genetic, because I see it in my mom, who also at a late stage in life, started her daycare business after spending years in an office, and was kind of the same way, which is like when I do some of my best work when my back's against the wall. And that's kind of how, and when she said that, I think I was, I'd graduated college and I was like, wow, like that's how I feel like I've gone through like life. It's just like,
which is every day in entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
everything is on fire all of the time.
Exactly. Like as I'm sitting here, I can tell you like 5 things that are going wrong in my life, business wise.
Well, wait, thinking of things going wrong, but also, right, there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that have ADHD. I have ADHD. That's sort of part of what I'm trying to do here is help people with busy brains, wrap their busy brains around creativity and food and entrepreneurship. One of the superpowers, one of the positives about ADHD is people tend to be resilient and have a lot of grit. And I know that you've had to have a lot of resilience and grit in this experience of building Hillside. And I was wondering if you could share a story or two that has built resilience or a lesson that you've learned kind of along the way when it comes to being resilient and overcoming these nonstop challenges.
I think, one example, and it's interesting, I've never been diagnosed with ADHD or ADD, but I feel like it's commonplace now for everyone to say they have it, but I have no idea if I do or not. but definitely suffer from some things that seem similar. In terms of resilience, one of the things that I've had to get really comfortable with is talking to people and being kind of the I feel like you were more in like the sales role for Not Just Co. I was more comfortable, or am more comfortable, being in that R&D space. Like I love that. And as I've grown in the organization, getting more comfortable and finding my space and being like the face or being the front person for the business, and getting told no, or getting people's reaction to something that I physically created, especially if it's negative, and not be like, I can't hide my face a lot of times. And
don't do that with your face.
Yeah. My wife tells me that all the time. So just fix your face. and getting very comfortable with that, and probably more broadly, just understanding like that this is a relationship business and getting better at building relationships. And so I say all that because one of the biggest things that has happened was, without being told, our co-packer earlier in the year went out of business, and we're on pace to have one of the best years we've had since being around. And that could have crippled us if I wasn't able to kind of pivot very quickly and call on some of those relationships that we built, both on the buyer side and also on the operations side, to kind of help fill the gap. And we were able to do that and actually get through, this holiday season coming up because of relationships being built and actually going back to old co-packers who we obviously, ended relationships with, but kept things cordial. And that was really important to me because I knew anything can happen in this business, and having contingencies is clear. Having a secondary or tertiary co-packer is nice in theory, but really it's not always, it's not always that clean cut. But at the very least, having a relationship with people that can help you when things go wrong is super important to me, at least, because it happened during the summer or late spring, early summer, when that's like a prime time for us. Seeing the trajectory, having a forecast of us being on a really good year, and that happening was like crazy. And rather than like curl up, I think I went to like fancy food or something. It was just like, that's a tomorrow problem. I'm going to figure it out.
Product. Yeah, for people who don't know what a co-packer is, that is literally the person making the sauce. Like, there is no business without somebody making your product. That is the whole.
Yeah.
Wow.
What I've realized is if I allow it, like, things like that will derail me completely, right? So it's best if I just like pretend it didn't happen for like 24 hours and go and allow myself to think through, like, what are my options, right? Who do I need to reach out to? Who do I need to like talk to? I had, multiple orders from one of our distributors that, was getting picked up at that co-packer that the doors are locked, products inside they can't get to. So I'm like, all right, let's prioritize. That's priority number one. We have orders. We got to get them out the door. We've got to figure out how to get product in the hands of customers who have already paid for or are in line to pay for that product. And then we've got to figure out how we're going to get a long-term co-packer back online. But in the middle of that, that's going to take months. So in the middle of that, who can we go to? Or do I need to strap up, the gloves and the boots and go into the kitchen again myself? Like, that's last case scenario. Because we've done that.
This is the thing we've all done.
So yeah, I mean, for me, it's resilience. But it's also just like understanding that I worked in a couple industries before this, and some of the people in rooms, especially in like more CPG spaces that I've worked in prior to my own business, would always say, we're not curing cancer. And what's the worst that can happen? Obviously, that's all well and good, but when you run your own business, you could lose your business. There's a lot of bad things that could happen. But I think the overall point is putting things into perspective, right? And realizing that if you take 24 hours for me, maybe it's a half hour for someone else, and just like think and pause. A lot of times you can you can bring a decent plan B to the table, and it may just be a Band-Aid, but at least it gets you to the next day, right? And that's kind of how I approach everything. It's like, I'm not going to allow this to ruin my year. I'm going to figure out how to make it work. And I've been lucky so far in my 41, I think. How old am I? I don't know. 41 years where sometimes things don't work out. And if they don't, we let go and we move on. And if we have a plan B, we move to the plan B. And if we don't, it is what it is. I've gotten really good at saying it is what it is.
One step at a time. I've heard you say you can't eat the whole elephant at once, which is one of my favorite things. I think you're better at actually doing it. I think I actually actively am trying to eat the whole elephant all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna try to channel you. I want to get back to the beginning of the podcast. We were talking about your daughter, and I'm just curious, how is having a child affecting your views on entrepreneurship? How are you and your wife balancing? That's such a stupid word, because any entrepreneur with a family knows that there is no balance. But again, you're a wise individual. You've been in this for a minute. I had my babies in sort of the beginning of the journey. I'm curious what you can share as far as like insights from the first little chapter here with a little one in a business.
Yeah, I think having Kennedy has been a game changer in many different ways. Like, I think, you could insert all the cliches that people typically say. But truthfully, it's just been amazing having her around and seeing just like her grow and imagining what she's going to be like when she's an adult and wanting to impact that in the most positive way possible. And I think back to, my mom being an example for me, and both my parents. Really, my father passed away a couple of years ago, but he was an example of just like hard work, back-breaking work. He was a bricklayer, right? And he never, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but he was just a hard-nosed guy and never really wanted any of us to follow in his footsteps and wanted us to go to college, wanted us to do this, wanted us to do that, because, he would be in the cold, turning cement and laying brick and all this stuff, and just didn't want us to get in that way of life. But I would see so many different sides of him. I would see him be such a social butterfly. And then in certain situations, when it's time to work, it was time to work. And he would say 2 words, right? And that stayed with me in life, where it's like, I know how to just like settle in and buckle down and get stuff done. And also, be kind of a social introvert. So I can go out and like be the life of the party and then come home and be tired and whatever. My mom was a great example for me, because she, like I said, the whole back against the wall, does her best work, and like being able to handle pressure and then starting a business, extremely influential in my upbringing and my decision to start my own business and kind of the way I live. And so I take all that and say all that to say, like, it's super important for me as I move forward to understand that the things I'm doing are being watched, right? And it impacts the way I think now. It impacts like my decisions. My wife and I have essentially sacrificed a certain type of life for this business. But I truly believe that if I'm able to create this story, success, unsuccess, whatever, trial, it's important for me to be able to share that story with her when she grows up, to give her the confidence to go out there and try something with no knowledge of how it's going to turn out, but just to have no regrets. And that's super important for me. Like, when I think about when I started Hillside, it was because like I said, I loved my job, but this thing was itching inside of me to go do something else. And I think there's so many reasons not to do something that you can obviously talk yourself into just going the straight and narrow. And I want her to grow up feeling like, well, I'm going to go try, because I have examples of people who tried in my family. And so that's important to me. But it's also important to me that she be able to have a better life than I had, just the same way it was for my parents, for me to have a better life than they had. And so, if Hillside at any point starts to impede on that, I won't even think twice. And I don't think I could say that 2 years ago. Like, I wasn't, like, it's just the end of the road if that ends up being the case. And so it's definitely helped me prioritize, but it's also strengthened my resolve in making this business work. And at some point, maybe there will be a conflict in those two things, but hopefully not. And I can have a great story and it'll be a success, and it will, be financially beneficial for our family and her. But if one of those things don't work, it's fine. I think at the end of the day, having an example that she can draw upon is probably the most important thing.
Amen. And also, I'm going to cry. Kamaal, what the hell? It's so nice. You're such a good dad. So I really only have one more little part of this. And that is, I do something that's always called the busy brain section of the podcast. And I ask 2 questions, and they are related to cooking. So take off your business hat for a minute. You're just getting in and making some oxtail or some escabeche or whatever. I need to know one thing that sparks creativity for you when you're in the kitchen, and then one thing that calms the chaos. And it can be physical chaos, it can be mental chaos, but those are my 2 questions for you.
So sparks creativity for me. I mean, this has been something growing up where, like I said, my parents only cooked a certain way. So when I would try to recreate meals from PBS, there was no veal in the house. There was no this, there was no that. And so a lot of God bless my parents for actually eating the crap that I made, but that wasn't always the best, but it was creative. So honestly, just like looking in the fridge or looking in the pantry and just making stuff, like not trying to follow a recipe, not really knowing what I want, but like having an idea of what flavor, if that makes sense, or what like feeling I want to have when I'm eating, and then just kind of going for it. And you're just like, oh, I have paprika. Let's see that. Oh, the red bell peppers. Let's throw that in. So I think just truly just looking at what's in the kitchen is kind of my like canvas where I can like just start to think about and like my hunger. I guess maybe it's a selfish thing. I don't really think when I'm cooking for myself or my family, it's more about me than them. Now that I think about it.
That's why it's so great to be the cook. You get to like deal with it, guys. And here's some dishes to clean up.
To be fair, though, my wife was always like, I wouldn't have thought to do that, but it's good. So I do hear that a lot. And then what calms the chaos for me is music. And specifically, I got into EDM, and I'm not like a big EDM person at all, so I don't know. But I got into EDM when I was in business school.
I wouldn't have guessed any of this, Kamaal.
Yeah. And then more recently, I got into drum and bass, which is like UK/EDM/ whatever. But it's just like really hardcore, like electrical music. And it's just like a heavy bass. And for whatever reason, like if I need to do an Excel spreadsheet, if I'm in the kitchen, I could just put those in and I will just crank. I love it. And I don't know if it's just because I don't have to think about, there's no words. Like I'm just like, it's just feeling. It's just beats. It's just whatever.
So then when we're cranking through whatever we got to crank through, we're going to think of Kamaal. We're going to get
great.
it done. Kamaal, where can everybody find you and Hillside Harvest? Where can we order your products? Where can we support you? And where can we get delicious Caribbean-inspired sauces and meal starters?
So yeah, you can order us on hillsidesauce.com or on Amazon, and follow us on Instagram at Hillside Harvest Sauce. And yeah, just stay tuned for some really cool stuff coming out in the next couple years. We're going to be, like I said, venturing outside of Jamaica into some other really cool islands and kind of exploring their condiment inspiration and hopefully bringing that to shelves near you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Kamaal. This was such a treat. I can't wait to see you in real life. We got to get the band back together. All the food founders here in Boston. We're overdue for a beverage or two, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe some EDM.
Great to see you. Yes, a little EDM. A little EDM. Thank you, Kamaal. Have a good one.
You as well. Thank you.
And you. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kamaal and that you feel inspired to explore Caribbean cuisine. Or maybe you really consider that career leap that's been brewing in the back of your mind. But whatever you do, you should definitely get some of Kamaal's delicious hot sauces and shark marinades. They are so good. I do have a favor to ask before you go. If you could take a minute to rate and review Not From Concentrate wherever you get your podcasts, it really helps people find our show. And if you liked today's episode, please take a moment to share it with a food-loving, busy-brained friend, especially if they really like hot sauce. All right, I'll see you next time.